I will call this meeting to order. If everybody will please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Kristen Matt-Miller.
Here.
Angie Schreiber.
Here.
Scott Peterson.
Here.
Jill Maddock-Nelson.
Here.
Catherine Solon.
Here.
J.D. Schrader.
Here.
Bobby Braun.
Here.
Dr. Dave Bardo. Danny Pyatt.
Here. Before we move to item 2, I thought about singing happy birthday to our administrator who just turned 39 again. But since I'm not a singer, we'll all just say happy birthday to our district administrator.
Happy
birthday.
Thank you.
That's what tonight really is. It's a birthday party. Okay. Item 2, letter A, district and school report card data presentation. I will turn it over to our district administrator.
So tonight will be a little different. It's more of a casual board meeting. What we're going to do is there are 2 packets that Ms. Stutzream has prepared for everyone at your seat. You will take those. You will grab your boxed supper and eat during Ms. Stutzream's presentation. And as soon as she is finished, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. Our building principals are here and assistant principals. You have the ability to also ask questions from them as well. A special thank you to Ms. Stutzream during the many hats that she is wearing and being an elementary principal at the same time. She's put a lot of work into this presentation, so thank you ahead of time, and I am sure it will be very informational. The goal for the end of the night is to make sure that every board member leaves here with the knowledge that you need in order to be able to speak to the improvement with student achievement to our community members. Okay? So at this time, if you would take your information, these handouts are yours to keep. Feel free to take notes if you have an ink pen. If you don't, if you need an ink pen, I have an ink pen. But the boxes of supper are marked at the end. Please take your box and your notes and sit somewhere in the audience so that everyone can watch the presentation, and Ms. Stutzream will be here at the podium. Thank you.
You guys got your food too. Yes, yes.
Oh, and also, I guess I should mention there are pickles in front of Dustin with some tongs if you like pickles.
Good, how are you? Always ready. What? Always coordinated. No, I just get it later. That's fine.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'll just grab one. Yeah. Nope, they have everything. What did you do with that? I know. And I'm just gonna get a piece of paper. I was supposed to. Right on. I already said Dustin, my backup dancers. All right, so we're going to begin. This is the presentation around the state report card. So at this time, we're going to start. You have, if you're a school board member, a packet of all of the state report cards, district in the front, and then all of the elementary schools, middle school, and high school to reference as we go through. Admin, I did share with you the same folder if you want to look at that. To the public, if you are here, you can find this on the DPI website under report cards, where you can pull up every report card from every school. The other packet you have is the 420 districts in the state of Wisconsin, and in ranking order based on their district state report card, so that you can see where everyone kind of ranks in the state, because that's going to be one part of the presentation. If you're trying to look for Antigo, we're on page 6. If you want to star it for future reference, right at the bottom of page 6. As we go along, it's a lot of information, so please make sure that you are asking questions during this presentation, so we don't wait to the end and then you have questions. So please just ask a question, raise your hand if there's anything you want to know. So this is obviously the Unified School District of Antigo for the 23-24 state report card, so our forward testing from last year. So we are going to move on to our priority areas. So every state report card, your district report card and school report card, has 4 priority area weighted scores. So that's going to be important as you look at those documents in front of you or on the internet. It's achievement, growth, target group outcomes, and on track to graduation. That is how they get your cumulative score on your state report card, and those are the chunks that we break out to make sure we're really identifying the strengths and the areas of growth that we need to do as a school and a district to make sure we're achieving for our community and our students. So that is we're going to start with the district report card. So if you want to open your folders to the district report card, that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with some changes in the accountability of scoring. So this is back in 2021, they changed the accountability scoring. You also might have heard on the internet, on the news, the changing of the scorecard for this year. So I want to make sure that everyone's aware of that as we look at the data. So these are the accountability scoring. Those from the beginning in 2021, those have stayed the same, so those are the ones we're still working off of. However, there has been some changes in our report card that will affect how we look at it from year to year, from last year to this year. So some historical context is that in Wisconsin, over a decade ago, Wisconsin and some other nearby states decided to align their test cut scores, that proficiency score, with the NAEP standards. Those are the National Assessment of Educational Progress. So that's what we've been working on for over a decade. So the proficiency levels on this national test are considered extremely high, And as we looked at Wisconsin standards, and as they have changed throughout the years, what happened is Wisconsin identified that what we were testing on our state tests of Forward did not always align with what our standards were saying. So as our math standards changed, it wasn't aligning. So one analogy is, if the test that we're taking and assessing our students with is a tape measure, it's like throughout the years, we started teaching in pounds and measuring in miles. So as those years kind of continued, it wasn't matching. So what the state did last year is they encompassed a bunch of people, administrators, teachers, people from all different areas of education, got together and realigned this state report card around the assessment, around the standards for Wisconsin. So when you're hearing that, it might sound like to some people that we're lowering our standards. We're actually in Wisconsin reflecting our actual student results with our academic standards for Wisconsin, so that we are testing kids on what we are teaching kids, which makes sense. So we want to make sure we are assessing those Wisconsin standards, that we are making sure in our classrooms we are matching to that depth of knowledge and rigor that we want our students to be able to perform at. Yes?
Where does Wisconsin standards rank in comparison to the rest of the states?
There's not a ranking system on where they rank. We tend to be one of the higher ones with Minnesota, New York, Texas, some of those states. I don't think any state would say their standards are low, but they make sure that their states are aligned with what our resources standards. We've done a lot of work this year here in Anago to make sure that we're really looking at the depth of knowledge that what we're teaching aligns with those standards, but there's no rating of like between states and other states around the comparability of standards, if that makes sense. It does not anymore, and that's the change. So last year's state report card still went on the NAEP standards. That's how they assess those forward scores of all of our students and rated on those cut scores, those proficiency scores.
I mean the questions themselves, were they related to Wisconsin standards, or is there NAEP standards?
There's NAEP standards, and those were what they were aligning to, but we are teaching to the Wisconsin state standards that keep getting like upped in rigor, right? As we learn more about brain research and things like that, the state will continue to move that bar and that proficiency cut score. So when they started looking, as those changed different from NAEP, it wasn't aligning with our assessment anymore. So that's the change that you're hearing in the community or on social media or on the news of why we can't compare completely last year's state report card to this year's state report card. There's no longer that apples to apples for just this year. And we'll go more into that as we go.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
So other states, and I don't mean to keep comparing to other states, but just to kind of get an idea, are they still going off of the other standards?
Some are, yep, some are. Wisconsin, yes, ma'am.
So the NAEP that Ms. Stuttering is talking about, those are assessments that they take a sampling from every state in the United States of America, and that's how they get like the scale or the cut scores or the benchmarks to make sure that everything is in comparison. So students from Wisconsin are selected for that. And it is possible that at some point in time that Anago students could be selected to participate in it. And it's like a blind random drawing. So that's what helps to keep everything in check and in balance.
Okay. Okay, so as we go on, you're gonna see that this does affect our state report cards. So past report cards will take the last 3 years of trend data, we talked about this last year, and compile that. This year, it does not. That's one of the changes in the accountability. It's taking 1 year of achievement data. So last year, when it compiled 3 years, we can't take the last 2 years because now those standards are different, that proficiency cut score is different. So we are kind of starting over in Wisconsin. We have 1 year of achievement. Next year, we'll have 2 years of trend. The following year, we'll go back to those 3 years of trend. Just like the last we had, we just can't cross over and use that all in comparison. Okay? So since the achievement part of one of those weighted areas is slightly affected by this, right, that achievement cut score, it also impacts your targeted group on your state report card because this includes achievement. It also impacts your on track to graduation because that score takes your ELA 3rd grade score and your 8th grade math grade score, that's why it's double weighted, into that. Because they say if you are a strong reader by 3rd grade and you have solidified your math scores by 8th grade, that should mean you are on track for graduation. That's how they come up with that on track to graduation. So since those two scores are taken into account, in those two weighted areas, and because the achievement cut scores have changed, that does get affected, okay? So as we're looking at, can you go back one? Okay, that's okay. So our overall score for the district is 64.4, which meets expectations, and you'll see those 4 priorities. If you want to clap, please feel free. I mean, the people got really excited. 64.4, and I'll show you a comparison later, but those 4 priority area weighted scores are shown there as well. Okay? And if you're following along, you can just flip the page. I think you have to flip 2 pages to this one. The priority area scores here, we're looking at English language arts at 46.5 out of the 100, on 45.9 for math, which achievement score, that proficiency cut score. You can see our growth in ELA and math. That's 62.2 and the 66 of the state. That smaller, like lighter blue is the state underneath. One of our celebrations, as you will notice, our math growth for the district actually beats the state math growth. So that's a huge celebration for Antigo. That's what we're looking to do. We're looking to beat the state average. So you're looking at our ELA scores on top. We are about 4 points away from hitting the state report card or the state score on that as well. So that's always a good barometer for us to make sure that we are doing what we need to do on growth to make sure we're hitting that proficiency score as well. Our targeted groups, you will see achievement is a place that we definitely need to grow on, but we have great growth. We're working on our chronic absenteeism, and then our graduation rate actually is up as well for Antigo, which is a huge positive as we look at our high school and make sure our students are going into the workforce and our career and college ready. And then our on track to graduation is broken down into those 4 parts. You'll see ELA in 3rd grade is part of that, like I stated. 8th grade math is part of that, as I stated. So that's why that is kind of encompassed by that new cut score as well. Okay? Any questions on kind of those District 4 areas of those priority areas? So now we'll go into a little bit more depth around that. So the achievement, and I have some information just from last year, just so we kind of know where we were. Last year we were at 41.2, we were at 44.4. So we've raised it to 46.2. So just to look at some of that growth. If you're wondering how we get that score, if Mr. Racine goes to the next one, you'll see the points-based proficiency. So when you're looking and saying, how do you get a score for a district or a score for a school? You're looking at the basic, the below basic, basic, proficient, and advanced. And those categories have kind of changed for the new state report card as well. But just to kind of give us some grounding in where we were. So what they do is take a student, however many students scored below basic, and they times that by 0. Meaning if you got below basic, you have a 0, it does not help us, right? If you didn't take the test, or for some reason you didn't test, that's a 0. For basic, students who score basic, which is under that proficiency line, they take all the number of students that scored below basic, and they times it by 0.5, that gets them a score. Anyone who gets proficient, they times the number of students times 1, so they basically get 1 point. That goes into the total, and then however many students scored advanced get 1.5, because it's weighted higher because we want our students to be advanced. So they get 1.5 times the number, they take all those, add them up, and you take your points divided by how many students you tested, and you get that score on your state report card. Any questions on that? So we're looking at kids from how they score, whether it's below basic, basic, proficient, or advanced. Even if those names change, that's still how we're getting our points-based proficiency to figure out that state report card point. Okay. So this is our student achievement broken down in the district based on race for English and language arts and by group of students. So we always want to make sure we're hitting all of our subgroups of students. You will notice that all of our students from last year to this year have gone up, except for our English language learners. Our English language learners are the only ones in ELA and math to not have a plus point system on the student achievement. So that's an area of growth for Antigo that we need to look at, because as you look at that subgroup, that went down a little in both ELA and math, And so definitely something that we've taken into consideration this year as we look to supporting our students, all of our students, and our English language learners as well. Any questions on this? Okay. These are our performances for the district in ELA and math, just in a graph form. One thing you'll notice from last year to this year, not that it can be completely correlated, right? Different cut scores. However, when I spoke with DPI and things like that to get an understanding of it, if you went up and an increase, that's a really good thing, meaning you increased, right? And I know that sounds weird, but if you went down or stayed the same and they shifted those cut scores, that's a problem. Okay, so we have had an increase. You will see one of the things we've talked about at many school board meetings is we don't want to forget our students who are proficient and advanced, right? We do focus on our students who are below because we want them to be proficient. We have interventions and things like that put in place. What you will notice is that our advanced and proficient actually went up. Our advanced kids went up by a lot more than we had before. I'll just tell you what we were at. We were at 4.2% in English and 4.9% for math, and we are currently at 7 and 9.3. So we're seeing a push for those students into that advanced category. Our area of growth. This is important for Antigo because we always want to make sure we are looking at those cut scores and saying, okay, are students proficient or not? But it's also important to see our students of how they're growing and making sure they're growing at the rate that we need them to grow so they can jump over that proficiency and make sure they're growing at the rate that we want them to grow at. When you find your growth score on your state report card or your school report card, what they do is they take every student and they compare them with students who are similar across the state to get a score. So if I am a student who is have a certain economic status, a disability, English language, gender, migrant status, race, ethnicity, they find the closest kid in the state of Wisconsin to that student and they compare their rate of growth to see is this kid who's like this kid here growing at the same rate, okay? And that's that score. So when you look at this graph, which looks a little small up here, ELA on the left, math on the right, we want to be over 3.0. 3.0 out of the range of 0 to 6 means that we are growing at an increase that we want to grow at. You will notice our area of growth is ELA. What I will say from last year to this year's though is you can see we're at 2.9, 2.8, 2.9 in all the different groups. We weren't that close to the 3.0 line. So we have definitely moved it towards that, but we do know that we need to get over that and move towards the 6. But we are closer from last year than we were. You will also know our students were less proficient last year in math. We had one last year that was not way down here proficient last year that was under the 3.0 and now we're over. If you look at last year's, what you'll notice is that our kids in math were like at 3.0 or 3.1 and we've moved them to 3.3s, 3.2s, so they are also moving on that continuum. Okay, so our goal here in Antigo is obviously ELA. That doesn't mean we forget about math, but we have to be hyper-focused around our ELA and literacy scores and make sure we have plans in place to move us over that to make sure our students are growing at the rate that we want them to grow at. And right now we are below that, and that is always a concern, and that's part of our continuous improvement plan for this school year. Another one of those priority areas is your targeted group outcomes. So your targeted groups are the ones, and this becomes a little bit trickier. We take our targeted group, which is the bottom 25th percentile of ELA, our bottom 25th percentile of math. So it's like a school report card within a school report card, or a district report card within a district report card. We want to really make sure that we have those students who are really struggling in either ELA or math identified so we can watch their growth and make sure, because if I'm a student who's struggling, my growth better be higher because I have longer way to go to get over that proficiency. So we really have to be intensive about that. That's one of the reasons that Wisconsin has put in the Act 20 around literacy that we will be working on this year and years to come to make sure that we are following that literacy plan, to make sure we are doing what we need to grow our students around the area and content of literacy and reading. So these component scores, we have achievement, growth, chronic absenteeism, and graduation underneath that targeted group. So the targeted group versus our non-targeted group, you can see we have some area of growth again in that achievement. We might be growing, but we're not going over that achievement line right now. We had growth in our growth category. You can see we are over the non-targeted group, which means we are growing our low percentage of students at a faster rate, which is wonderful. That's what we want to see in both ELA and math. That's to all the hard work that our schools are putting in on interventions to make sure we're really identifying the skill gap and doing what we need to close that. We have a ways to go with chronic absenteeism, getting our kids to school and not missing school. Graduation is also increased. Here in Anago, we're not quite over where we want to be, but we have definitely increased that graduation, and the stuff that's going on at the high school this year is going to make an even bigger impact on that, around our graduation rates. This is just if you're a math nerd and really want to know how to figure out and calculate out that targeted group. So this is kind of just a demonstration of how they take all the calculations and formulate it into selecting those students who are the bottom 25th percentile of ELA and math and putting them together to make that targeted group that then we identify in those trend lines. And it just gets a little bit more complicated as they go through that formula to figure that out. If you want more on that, it's on the DPI website. I wasn't going to bore you with formulas tonight. All right, and the fourth priority area is that on track to graduation. Again, those 4 components that score, that ELA score, that math score in 8th grade, absenteeism, and the graduation rate, all encompassed into that on track to graduation. You will see we are at 75.8, and last year we were at 73.9. So we did make an increase there. That's always the goal, obviously, of the high school, but as I just told our elementary staff, it starts at 4K, K, and 1. They are indicators in that foundational skills of how our kids graduate. We don't always think that way, and our teachers, do the great work at the foundational level, but they have a big impact on how our kids graduate based on that reading score in 3rd grade. You can see we have some work around absenteeism and chronic absenteeism, which is they're labeled chronically absent if they miss more than 10% of the possible attendance days. So if you're thinking about what does that mean? And we include students enrolled for 90 days. Those days do not have to be continuous. So if I'm a student who enrolls, and then maybe I unenroll and I come back, if I am in our district for more than 90 days, I am counted in this. Okay? If I come back again, doesn't matter how many times you come back, 90 days. Graduation. So graduation is the average of 4- and 7-year cohorts over time to make sure we're watching those cohorts of graduation. The class of 2023 and the class of 2020 now, to make sure that we are hitting that. This is where you'll see we are above the statewide for graduation here in Anago at 93.4, and the state is at 92. So that's a great jump for us, and hard work done by the high school to get us there. So from last year to this year, because it's always good to look at trends to figure out if what we did worked, if what we did is successful, should we do it again, making those decisions around continuous improvement. We were at 59.7 and we are at 64.4 this year. So we continue to meet expectations, which is wonderful, but never good enough for us here in Anago. So we want to continue to exceed expectation and then significantly exceeds and go to number 1 in the state. So we are going to give you a little historical on the report card. So it's always good to know where we came from. So back in 2017, you will see this is the state report card for Anago. You can see the trend kind of where we went and where we ended up this year. We're back at 64.4, which is great. We're going in the right direction, and we're going to continue to grow that. On the next slide, you will see the state rankings. So the state rankings, and this is where if everyone in the state's cut scores and proficiency scores were moved, right, and changed, every person's, every district's, every school's were moved the same amount, this is where we really see how we did in Wisconsin. So in 21-22, we were at 413. There's 420 districts in Wisconsin. Some districts, if you notice on the list that I gave you, it'll say school. Some districts are just an elementary school because they're a feeder school into another district, so that's why there's a couple of those that look a little bit odd. So we were 413 out of 420. In the 22-23 school year, we were at 385 out of 420, and this past year, we jumped to 296 out of 420. We moved up 89 districts. So when you think of that, our growth score, our proficiency score, we jumped 89 districts in the state of Wisconsin on that move. We are out of the 300s and 400s. We are looking at almost trying to get to that halfway mark and continue on. But that's a huge celebration for Anago and the teachers and the staff and everyone who works here in the community and our families who send their children to us every day and ensure that we can provide an education. We are moving this district in the right direction. And the data is showing that by moving all those spots in the districts in the state, that we are making growth at an incredible rate. And that's going to just continue with the work that's being done at every school. Any questions on that? All right, so we're going to go school by school right now. So if you do have questions.
Amy, what do you think the biggest factor was in the?
Thank you for asking. There's a few of them. I think that from my knowledge of what I know, one of the issues was we did not in the past test all of our students. So right there, when you look at that, I'm below basic or I get a score of 0. If you don't test them, it's 0. So if we didn't test everyone, that is a problem. RVA students are also part of our state report card. RVA students tend to vote to, as a family, to not have their kids tested. That does impact us. However, last year, the high school worked incredibly hard to get every student, I mean, Mr. Morank was running to houses. We were tracking down children to get them tested. We tested every student possible. We nicely harassed our RVA parents to make sure they could bring their kids in so we could get them tested. It was an all hands on deck to get the test actually done, right? That's just number one, like we got to test the kids. I think that last year, the intentionality around interventions and making sure we knew where our students were was up significantly from past years, which is great work by our students and our administrators in the building. We were identifying where the skill gaps were and doing something about them in a more systematic way. We had a new resource at the K-5 level of interreading. We utilized our resources at all levels in a more fidelity way, with more fidelity to make sure that we're actually using that and hitting that level of standard that our students need to be proficient at that grade level. If anyone else wants to jump in of things that they have done at their buildings to make sure that this was successful. Yep.
You strategically used coaches in a different way. Do you want to talk about that?
Yep, we had instructional coaching program used in a different way. We currently have 4 instructional coaches at our elementary. One kind of bleeds into our middle school, one at our middle school, high school, and another one at the high school. So we have some overlap, but our instructional coaches really dive deep into the standards. They're working incredibly hard with teachers through our professional learning communities. I think, JD, another thing is that we held professional learning communities at all levels in more intentional ways to make sure we're doing the right work instead of just talking logistics about field trips and things like that. We're talking about instruction and that tier 1. So there's many components that I would say impacted that jump of 89 districts based on the work that was done.
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
So you talked about interreading, which is one resource, but when you came in, you also looked at that resource and identified the specific gaps that it had in it. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so the push around literacy in the state of Wisconsin, we definitely have that issue here in Anago, just like a lot of districts have. A lot of our students have not received, not just in Anago, but in Wisconsin and in the country. Now, no longer we're doing direct instruction and explicit instruction around phonics. We've talked about this many times around Reading Horizons, implementing some of that phonics instruction. We had a lot of students within those years not know how to decode and read, so obviously when I get to my reading comprehension assessment, I'm not doing as well. So last year, having that and Reading Horizons and putting in some of that explicit phonics instruction, especially at the elementary, but also at the middle school level, was a big proponent of why we saw some growth, because we were able to be readers. We could break down the syllables, we could read multisyllabic words, all which is encompassed within these tests that we ask our students to take. So that is a huge thing, and we're just gonna get better at that, because now with Act 20, we are gonna take different assessments at the elementary school starting in January to drill down even more specifically on skill gaps and to really identify what the kids need and have specific probes that will help support that skill gap for that child. Every parent of a student from kindergarten or 4K through 3rd grade who is at the bottom 25th percentile, like our targeted group, We are sending a specific reading plan home, almost like an IEP or a 504, but like a specific reading plan of this is what we are gonna do with your child, with you, to make sure we get them reading and at the grade level by 3rd grade. And so that's kind of the push of Act 20, which is gonna be great for us around our learning for staff, but also for our kids' instruction around phonics to make sure we have those basic skills and those foundational skills of literacy before we move into the middle school. It's very hard to teach middle school and content when I can't decode a CVC word. And that puts that pressure on the teacher of now I have to gap fill and teach grade level content. And we always hear there's not enough time. That's why, because we are constantly doing double when we should just be able to teach our content area at our grade level.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Yeah.
What are you doing for the multilingual learners?
Yes, so that is we talked about that, about being an area of growth, absolutely. We knew this was an area of growth last year as well, encompassed around our students who are English language learners. Now, these are students who are identified based on an assessment, on a screener, so not every student who speaks another language, as you know, is an EL learner, so it's just specific those students. We do have some things in place. We're having coaching for all of our teachers who have students in their classrooms who are identified as EL through CESA 2 to make sure we have some Tier 1 coaching instruction of how is I, as a teacher who only speaks English, able to teach students who speak Hmong, Spanish, Japanese, any other language within my classroom. I am not gonna go learn another language right now to help, but there are many instructional practices that we can put in the classroom in Tier 1, which is that basic classroom foundation, to help support our students. Through our Title grant, through Title III, we also have a lot of different resources through CESA 9. So our 4K through 3rd grade students are working on Imagine Learning, which is a program that helps them with English acquisition, rather than just I'm learning English words, but actually language acquisition. How do I say I need to use the restroom? Or when I go to the store, how do I communicate with people? 4th grade through 12th grade has Summit K-12, which is an online program, which is new this year for all of our districts. So we're starting to learn how to utilize that in a more efficient way for our 4th through 12th graders and making sure that we are helping our students learn English while learning in English in our classrooms. I'm really proud of the teachers this year because after some of the coaching, every EL student has an ILP, which is an individual learning plan, kind of like an IEP for a student with special needs, that dissects what accommodations they need in class. For example, if I'm a high school student and I'm supposed to learn comprehension around biology, and I don't read or speak in English, that becomes very difficult. However, if I can translate that content into my language, and now I'm listening to my peers and my teachers teach, I'm connecting my learning that I learned in my language with English that's happening in the classroom, and it's building my English skills. So some of those things, and teachers are reaching out more, which I'm really super proud of them and excited for our students of, wait, this kid doesn't know how to do this. How could I help him in this classroom, right? How can I help translate this, but still be teaching English, but maybe if it's comprehension, really get what that kid needs to understand it, so when we do discuss in class, that kid can jump right into that discussion and help. So that's been huge. We met with every teacher and walked through their ILP with them, with our CESA 2 consultant, to make sure that teachers were very well versed in which students these are and how I help accommodate for them. And then we do the access testing in December and January for those students so we can look at their score and see their growth with language acquisition in English to make sure that we are quickly identifying which students need more support or ones who are working on moving to that level 7 of that test, which means I have full English capabilities and I don't need support anymore. Is that good? Okay, yes, ask more if you have any questions.
How many English learners do we have in our district?
In this district, we currently have 39. From 4K through 12th grade. 4K students aren't identified. We don't do the screener till kindergarten. It does not mean we don't help support, but it just means they don't have that quote-unquote identification until kindergarten screener. And then it takes about 7 years to have full language acquisition. So if I took Mr. Marak, since he's sitting in front of me, and I put him in Mexico, and I said, good luck to you, it would take him around, unless you know Spanish, if he doesn't know any. So it would take him around 7 years to really be able to encapsulate all the wonderful language and the cultural language and the idioms and the alliterations and kind of those nuances of the language to be super proficient in that language. So we hope our students that we get, no matter what grade level, that speak a different language, we are helping to support them to get to that level.
So you're getting closer to the percentage of ELL students needed in order to get the funding for a teacher?
Yes, we are getting closer. So it takes at the elementary level, you have to have 10 students within one building in order to change your programming around, instead of just having at like coaching support, actually having an EL teacher, or actually having like a program. Some people have like bilingual classrooms. We don't have enough students to have that, but that's an offering that other districts do have because their number of students with EL identification is higher. Yep, so we are getting closer. That would be wonderful to help support students. We have students that speak, at this time, Spanish, Hmong, and Japanese in our district around our EL. Yep.
Are there any exemptions to taking assessment? It's asked yearly.
For the students who don't speak English?
No, sorry,
Oh.
for any student.
Okay, I will answer both. If you are new to country as an EL student, you have a one-time option to opt out of the ELA portion of the forward and not have it affect your school report card. So I get a one-time shot. If I come to America and I enroll in Anago and it's March, I do not have to take the ELA part in that season of testing, but come the next year I will, because I've used my one exemption. Families always have the option to exempt their students out. However, that does cost us a 0 on our state report card, so we want our kids to be tested. The other reason we want our kids to be tested, and we talk to our families about it, is we use this data to intrinsically and methodically plan out their plan. It's one of the diagnostic data points that we use. If we don't have that for a child, we have to find other data points, but it is very useful to know where our teaching, where our instruction is falling, but also how to support the student. So it's kind of, it helps the school in that way so that we know, is our instruction working, right? Is our growth working? Is our proficiency there? But also for the student, how to identify the needs that they're having. It's one of those data points. But there is always that opt-out for families, but we do always have that conversation with them. Okay? All right, we'll move on to East Elementary. You will see that East Elementary from last year to this year on their state report card, again with different proficiency cut scores, went up 0.5 and are currently exceeding expectations. They are one of our schools that hit exceeding expectations this year, which is a very good thing for our district. You will see the historical report card data for East. We are currently higher than we've ever been at East Elementary from 2017 forward, which is exciting that we are hitting some of those grounds and going forward. Is it what we wanted to grow? 0.5 is not that much. No, however, it is in the right direction. And then there's some achievement history for East as well, so that achievement area of that weighted report card, you will see we again at East are at the highest that we've ever been since 2017. At North Elementary, you will see that we are still meets few expectations. This is a concern, right? We don't sugarcoat our data. We are not all about the celebrations. We can celebrate and also say we have a lot of work to do. North Elementary, not because of the teachers, has a lot of work to do. So we went actually down. This is the only school in the district that went down 0.5 on their school report card. So that is a concern. We know what the conditions are that we need to fix and support. We have a lot of students. We have a great title teacher at North who is providing a lot of great instructional pieces. We have better tier 1. We're working really hard to make sure that this does not happen again. But North is one of those that we have kept under that microscope now of we need to make sure that we are hitting every skill gap in those students. And doing something different. I know third grade is working on, we have in math, to make sure that they know their fluency. That's a huge problem. If I don't have my foundational skills and I hit third grade and I still don't know how to do the addition in my head, I don't know how to do my doubles, I don't know what my doubles +1, that becomes really hard when I go into fourth grade. So we do know we have a lot of work to do. Their historical North data, you can see in 2017 was a lot higher than where we are now. It has progressively went down. We have kind of swung it back up, but not definitely to the point where we want that to be. And then their achievement history is a little bit better. We have stayed the same from last year, this year on just that achievement, and I'm gonna tell you why. It is not because we stayed the same. With those cut scores, if you had a school that went down or stayed the same, they kept you at last year's score. So when they made that shift in that algorithm of those cut scores, so if you see the same score, that might mean you actually went down. We just held it as a state to that, so now we can move on with those next trend lines with the new standards. So this does not mean that it actually held consistent. It probably went down on that achievement. So again, North is a need. We know that, we've identified that, and that's why our continuous improvement there looks the way it does. Okay? West Elementary is at meets few expectations. It went up 0.7 from last year to this year. What I will say about the elementary, and again, not the staff, take the staff out of it. What I will say about these 3 schools and the systems and the things put in place, if we would have done better in the 3 elementary schools, you would have seen a huge increase in our district report card. Even bigger than the 89 jump of in the state, we would have found a huge increase. So that's something we identified and looked at and know we have to put a lot of work into. That's why we have intensive coaching happening. That's why we have new resource. We're piloting a math resource. We're making sure our EL students have support. We have done all that work, and we're hoping that we see that growth. Here's West report card. You will see that they went up just a little bit from last year. You will see that 0.7. Definitely not where we were in 2017. And then you will see that achievement history kind of stayed consistent, went up by 0.8.
We have no growth scores, correct, in our elementary?
Right. Yep. We don't have growth scores because we don't have that 3-year trend because we only test 3rd graders and we don't have those 4th graders with us to kind of get that growth score. All right, Antigo Middle School. Big celebration, went up 4.7 from last year. Another one of our building that's hitting exceeds expectations. I have no trouble saying why, because the amount of intense scrutiny around every student at that school to the point of like almost obnoxious is amazing. So, I mean, like, if you, like, watch a meeting, you're like, oh, my goodness, you are drilling down to every child with every skill, and there is a plan for everything, and people know what that plan is. So that's very exciting for our middle school and the hard work that's been done there for that growth. You'll see that we are at the highest we've ever been from 2017 at that middle school, which we are moving in that right direction. We hit the 70s, which is awesome. And you will see that the achievement is almost back to where it was in 2017. So we're moving back up on that achievement as well, okay? Antigo High School. They were at meets few expectations and they moved a whole range into meets expectation. Went up 4.4, which is a great increase from one school year and moving again in that right direction. We keep talking about that because we have to shift this district in the right direction. This is not a district that when you come into it, you're like, oh, we just have to help one school. This is a district that the entire district, system-wide, needs to move in the right direction. I always say we cannot sit and work really hard in canoes going to different islands. We are hard workers. We need to move in the same direction towards that same goal, and we're seeing that happen, which is very exciting. You will see that we are 58.3 for our report card there. We're almost back up to that 2017 marker. And then you will see one thing we have to do is that achievement at the high school, right? We have great growth. We're growing that graduation rate. We're getting kids to school. We're getting kids into classrooms. Even if you come to school, you don't have truancy because you're in the hallway. You're in a classroom now, taking attendance on you. And now it's that proficiency, it's that tier 1, which is one of the reasons why we went with Solution Tree here in Antigo, to make sure we severely address the instruction happening. Doesn't mean the instruction is bad. It means we need to up our game and that instruction, make sure every kid is getting it. To make sure every kid is getting that level of rigor at that high school. And we've already seen really great celebrations at the high school around the Solution Tree work and the work put in by admin to make that happen. So we're hoping that our achievement is one of those things we're going to watch at the high school, and we're doing some interventions and things like that at the high school this year, which we've never done before, to hopefully make sure we close that gap and move us where we need to be. Here is The last slide. You will see, I like to look at, you can look at that long list of schools that I gave you for the whole state of Wisconsin. Here is the list of schools around us that are like us, that are in our area, to make sure we know where we rank. Because it's very important that our growth, we talk about being #1 in the state because Antigo deserves it, Antigo schools deserve it, our kids deserve it, our community deserves it. We are well on our way of moving towards that right direction. We were very much not in this position last year, so that is a huge celebration, and this is where that 89 student or school jump goes. I had somebody say we're on the heels of Wausau. Wausau is a great district. We are on the heels of Wausau, which is exciting for a smaller district like Antigo. And we're coming to take over, and we're gonna keep going to #1. So this represents where we are kind of in our community. Any questions? Thank you.
You did an exceptional job.
Oh,
Ms. Dutcher.
thank you, thank you. If you think of any questions or any questions come up from the community, make sure you send me an email. Yeah, Mr. Peterson?
What do you say to some of these legislators that are bad-mouthing the switch?
Mm-hmm.
We're getting some bad press because they say the trust is watered down. How do you answer that?
Well, just like I said before, we took our standards for Wisconsin, that's what we're teaching to, so we want to assess our students on that, right? It doesn't make sense, like I said before, to use a test like the tape measure and then teach in pounds and test them in miles. So we want to make sure we really close that. There's always going to be naysayers, right? Is this the perfect formula? No. This is why we don't live and die by a state report card. We don't do all of our instruction based on this. It is one data point for us to tell us how we are doing in Wisconsin, to make sure we are addressing the needs. But we drill down with our district assessments, we drill down to our classroom assessments to make sure that we triangulate that data so that we're not just picking one piece of data and hanging our hat on it. So yeah, people can have their opinions all they want, I guess. And they do, right? However, if the whole state moved to this, right, it's not just Antigo, the whole state moved, our growth in that shows we're on the right path. So if you want to nitpick over point this and point that, great. You can't apples to apples that value added growth either, because it's not apples to apples on the state report card anymore from last year to this year. It will be next year, right? We'll be able to do apples to apples comparison. It's not this year, oh well.
I guess that's what you would say to that guy.
I sure would. Yes, yes, sir.
Wait till next year.
Right, and then we'll wait till next year, and when we grow again, you can't just say like, oh, must have been a fluke, it was the test, right? We put in a lot of hard work here in Antigo, just like I know a lot of districts have. We were intentional about our work, we were relentless in our work, stubborn sometimes in our work, and pushed through a lot of things as teachers and staff, some hardships and some barriers, but this is a result we can be proud of. It could be something that our teachers hang their hats on and be proud of what the work they did. And I think that's what we take away from that. And if people want to call me and have questions, I would love to answer them. But this is where we are, and we're going to be excited about it and find our areas of growth and identify it and do better for this next year. Done with my soapbox. Any other questions?
So if somebody questions the state ranking, like, oh, it is apples to apples.
The state ranking is because everyone moved the same proficiency cut scores. So that's kind of where, when we looked at it as a team of administrators, that's where we're like, okay, even if some of our schools are higher than maybe what it was or what it quote-unquote should be, right, between last year and this year, the jump looks bigger in some of those areas than maybe what it would have been if the cut scores weren't changed. Great. We still went up, and that's awesome. The whole state moved, so when we look at that ranking, that's something to be proud of, that we moved 89 districts, because if I had to stand here and say we went down 81 districts or 89 districts, that would not feel great, right? We would be sitting here saying, what are we doing that's not moving us in the right direction? We are moving in the right direction. We're going to continue that hard work as we go forward this year, next year, and years to come. Thank you so much for coming. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Yes.